Music theory. Why guitar tablature with the top heavy E string, the one closest to the ceiling on top, is better to learn from. Noting this topic sounds similar to our prior presentation, but it is different because the prior presentation was talking about the orientation of the fretboard video representation, whereas this presentation is talking about the orientation of tablature and worksheets. We will have similar arguments as to why we're going to be doing things a little bit different, but there are differences, including the justification as to why the current system is the way the current system is. And I think in this presentation, where we're talking about tablature, the justification for the current system is a little bit stronger. I still believe that, of course, changing it would be more optimal, but let's go over the rationale real quick. Recall that in the prior presentation, we were talking about the video representation of our playing to help learners, making the argument that if this is us learning, we are facing the video, the screen, then our fretboard is facing this way as we are behind the guitar. If we're looking at the screen, naturally the screen would usually be orientated the other way. So that would be opposite. That would make it more difficult to learn from, although that would be the natural way to video something. We can mirror it in the software so that it's looking like this, which makes it look like we're left-handed. That you would think that would lead to more confusion, but that would be kind of like looking into a mirror. It's actually more natural to look at it this way because you can mimic what is happening more cleanly as it is on the same side of your body. So there was a question of why didn't we do that? Why is nobody doing that? Well, I think it's mainly because the video presentations are still relatively new and because people like to play their guitar and look cool playing the guitar as well. So they want to look like they're on stage or something playing the guitar, even though they're doing like a presentation for teacher purposes. So there might be some drive to have a different goal other than just the best optimal format for teaching is one argument. When we have the tablature, we have a similar situation where the tablature is designed kind of as though we were looking at the guitar. And that means that if we just flip the guitar around, then it's either going to have the neck facing the wrong way, or if you rotate it, it's going to have the high strings on top. So most tablature is having the high or skinny strings on top, even though when we hold the guitar, we have the skinny strings on the bottom, the low heavy string, the one closest to the ceiling on top. Now, some reasons for doing that, you would imagine that when they actually wrote the tablature down, they probably wanted to look at the guitar, and when you look at the guitar, you can't take the mirror image of it like you can in software. You can basically turn it around and look at the frets with the skinny strings on top. They were probably also thinking that's kind of nice because it goes along with the idea of pitch going up. So they might have liked it because it ties into normal sheet music, or the idea at least of sheet music as well. So remember, when we're talking about these kind of worksheets, this is different than sheet music. So if you're learning like the piano or if you're learning classical type of pieces, then of course you have to read technical sheet music. If you're trying to play Beethoven or something like that, you're not allowed to play something different. There is a range of variants that you might be able to play in different styles and whatnot, but it's a lot tighter of a range. And that's really impressive that the sheet music is able to be as specific as it is able to be. However, the tablature for the guitar is usually designed to give you a more loose framework so that you have more room possibly to improvise. So some people think of it, well, it's just the easy way to do things. Yeah, okay, it's the easy way to do things as well, but it's also just giving you the outline, allowing you to do what guitar players often want to do more, which is to basically improvise over a general outline. So my argument would, of course, be that we should have the heavy E string on top for the same reason we talked about last time, because I want to be learning as I'm facing the worksheets to have the worksheets line up the same way I see them. So I would like the video presentations to be lined up so it looks like the player is left-handed, which I can do by taking the video and just taking the mirror image. And then I would like my worksheets to have the low or heavy E string as though I just took my guitar and imprinted the strings on the screen. That allows me to focus all of my mental energy when learning on whatever I'm trying to learn, which is basically the scale shapes and the intervals and whatever it is I'm learning. All right, so notice that nobody is really doing this. And again, it kind of boggles my mind that at this point in time, there's some things out there that's starting to do this, but the vast majority of everything out there, even with all the resources that we have, are not doing this. So we need to make the case as to why I think this would be a better way to do it, and then possibly ask why it's not being doing this way, and how will this affect any kind of translation issue. That's the big downside that people might argue against. They might say, well, yeah, it's easier that way, but if you learn it that way, you won't be able to read tablature correctly because all the tablature is reversed. And I'll just want to point out now, just to address that real quick, just realize it's just like with the guitar here. I think the more you work with it, the more you'll be able to rotate things around in your mind. So what you'd like to do is isolate the particular thing that you're learning, and I don't think it'll detriment your ability to kind of flip the thing around if you need to flip it around. Tablature isn't all universally the same way either. Some of it goes left to right, and some of it's kind of vertical. So the more we play the guitar, the better we will get at flipping it. Also, the software these days, like ChatGTP and whatnot, is getting to the point that you can change the tablature to whatever you want. So this idea that it was written down and therefore can't change is becoming less and less of an argument. That's the big argument as to why tablature is the way it is in educational places, because they want to tie into the textbook, and the textbook is tying into the way things have been done since we started writing this stuff down, which happened to be the way it happened to be, and then it got solidified in a similar way as language gets solidified when it's written down. Before we had the printing press, language was changing all the time. So vowels changes, you got the great vowel shift and whatnot. Once you write it down, then now it's the way it's supposed to be. That means you don't have change, for good or for bad. Sometimes it's bad because sometimes the change would be good. And that's what we're making the case for here. We're making the case for the change. We're making the case. And I'm going to make the case out of alligator skin because I like the case when it's made. Okay, that's stupid. Matches physical reality. So on the guitar, the top string, the low E, is physically closest to your face and top when you're looking down. So just like the argument here, obviously when we're playing the guitar, we have the low or heavy string on top. So that's going to line up. I would like to have that line up to my worksheet. So by flipping the tab so the low E is on top, the visual layout finally matches what your hands and eyes experience. So clearly, I think it's intuitively obvious that if my guitar is facing this way, it would be best to just imprint the strings on the screen and have the tablature face the same way. That's just the easiest thing to do. So that's not the way it's currently done, however. So this is the way I would make the tablature, or how I would represent the fretboard. We've got the low or heavy E string on top. The high E string is going to be on the bottom. But if you look the way tab is usually done, say here, it's reversed, meaning this is going to be the high string or the thinnest string on top. Or with chord charts, oftentimes it's vertical. So I think the attempt to make it vertical is an attempt to make the low string closer to the top. And notice why would they do that instead of just taking the mirror image? And I think it goes back to the idea that they want to imagine they're looking at the guitar, a physical guitar, and you can't take the mirror image of a physical guitar unless you show it into a mirror. You can rotate it around, and so if you rotate it around this way, you get the vertical fretboard, or you can rotate it all the way around where you get the skinny string on top. So it makes sense if you're trying to line it up to a physical guitar, what you're looking at from the front of it. But what we do when we play it is look at it from the back of it, and therefore it makes sense to do the mirror image of it. So that's why I think these two formats, you could still kind of see them once you get better and better at playing the guitar, but I think it'd be a lot more difficult to transpose than the easy thing, the natural thing, would be to line it up specifically to the way you're seeing it from your perspective from behind the guitar. All right, so matches, spreadsheet, and grid logic. So in Excel, we're going to be doing a lot of our stuff in Excel. We'll make that argument as to why that's the best software ever for music stuff. Yeah, because you're an accountant, you say that. No, it's not because I'm an accountant, maybe a little bit, but it's the best for music stuff, I'm telling you. So in Excel or a matrix base, the top row is the top, naturally aligning to the low string. So we can obviously line it up by basically imagining that we imprint the strings on the screen in our Excel worksheet, and it's just perfect. So this allows a true one-to-one logic in fretboard mapping, scale construction, and modal patterning. So now I have something here that basically I can visualize my hand as I'm playing as one-to-one as possible. That's what you want with tablature, because it's not, right? So why hasn't anybody else done this yet? This is the question. So one reason we're going to say is historical inertia. Now, again, I think the argument here is actually a little bit better than the argument for the video presentations, because the video, the reason people don't do it is not because of historical context. It's not like, well, the textbooks were written this way and I'll confuse people. It's just because the new technology hasn't been adopted just for purely educational purposes. There's nothing stopping somebody from doing that. But here there is something that could be a legitimate argument, that being that the texts that have been written down, all the tablature up till now, is done the way it's done. So that's the argument we need to address if we want to change it. So early tablature was handwritten and based on classical lute, which is kind of like the precursor to the guitar, where strings were labeled bottom up. So digital adopted, copied the convention rather than rethinking it. Now, notice if you're back in the day and you're like, dude, this lady's playing great, I want to make her some tablature make it easier, because then she'll be happy with me if I do that. So we're like, okay, how can I do that? Well, I'm going to take this lute and I'm going to try to map it out on paper or whatever I had, a sheep hide or something at the time. See how it's facing this way? I don't want to write it down when it's facing this way, because that's going left to right the wrong way. It's going down in pitch. So what can I do? I can physically rotate the guitar this way. I can rotate it this way, but if I do it, you can imagine the neck going around here. That's going to end up with the low or high-pitched string, the skinny string on top. And that's probably what they did. They probably imagined, well, that's kind of good, because that's the way you would look at it if I had the thing sitting in front of me, and it actually has the pitch going up in pitch, which musically, if you weren't looking at the instrument, might make sense, right? Because you're going to say, well, it should go up in pitch as it goes higher, and that's the way it would kind of line up. But obviously, that's not the way she's seeing the guitar from her perspective, because she's behind the guitar. So you can see logically why that probably happened, or the lute. It's a lute. But it's probably not the optimal thing. And once it's written down, then it got codified, just like language got codified once written down. And then you didn't have these big vowel shifts and whatnot. Old English don't sound like current English. It's all messed up. And if you have any slang, then that doesn't match what a news reporter says. People make fun of you these days, which isn't very kind, because not everyone talks like a newscaster, okay? Not everyone okay. Anyway, industry locked it in. So then the music publishers, software, and teachers standardized around the traditional tablature. So now it's in the textbooks, right? So changing the convention seemed costly and confusing. So you can see clearly once it's in an institution, like the universities, for example, all their textbooks are there. Now there's a financial investment in it. They're vested in it. Changing it becomes problematic, right? I'm expecting a knock on my door from the universities. The commies at the universities are going to come at me. I'm just joking. So why hasn't it been done? So fear of confusion. So in the pre-digital era, distributing two system, classic and flipped, would be chaotic. So if you have a textbook saying, well, this is the way it's been done before, and now this is a system that I think will be easier for you to learn, that's going to be a problem, because now you have to have two textbooks. Now, these days, we're going to get into this, but just want to have a precursor here. It's not so much the case these days, because translation these days is easy because we have like ChatGTP. So the argument that this is the way it's always been done, it's been codified, we can't change it because the textbooks are that way, we won't be able to interact with history, becomes less and less valid as software becomes better and better. So I think it's at this point where you can't really make that argument. The argument to me at this point is what's the best system, and then how do we bridge the gap so that we can bridge back and forth between the two systems. That, to me, we're at that point. If we're not there yet, we'll be there soon. So teachers avoided flipping systems to stay consistent with the books, forums, and videos. So why now is the time to change? So the internet enables instant conversion. So again, I think this argument was somewhat valid because if you're in an era, especially when you didn't even have the printing press, right? And you're like, dude, I can only use the tools that I have. I'm not going to change them because they don't match all the other tools, and printing things is costly. Even today, clearly the big publishers are doing what the big publishers do, and you don't want to contradict the big publishers, right? They're doing their thing. That's where you get all your resources. You're basically, as a school, promoting the big publishers, right? So that is the way it is. But with the internet now, again, the conversion is easy. So that the schools themselves are having a problem because they no longer have a monopoly over information that is universal and complete logic based. You can't have a monopoly over math once the internet is out because it's not something that you can't have a patent on truth, right? So so now you have the conversion. So you have the old information. I can take the information. It's all the old texts and whatnot are now in public domain, most of them, a lot of them, and therefore I could just take the text and convert it into the current system, and that's easy to do. ChatGTP, other AI softwares, if not now, soon, you could just say, here's my logic, ChatGTP. It's all logic based. That's what music is, logic. It's all ratios, and you just say, this is my logic. This is the old logic. Just compare it to the old logic, make the translation. It's as easy as Google language, easier, I would think. So a simple script, spreadsheet, or plugin can flip tabs instantly. So you can now view or print flip tabbed without rewriting or reloading anything. So why no one's doing it? So open source tools. So AI tools can auto-translate traditional tab to flipped format. So AI tools like ChatGTP and other AI, artificial intelligence tools are amazing at this. I've been playing with these to put together the system I'm going to propose, which I'm not saying is that's going to fly or whatever, but something like that is going to happen sometime because at some point people are going to be like, dude, there's nothing stopping us from making it more streamlined. So I'm make the argument here, and the only argument really that makes sense is, well, that's the way it's always been done. The textbooks are all this way. We won't be able to interact with the past. That's no longer the case with conversion software that's just available without any special apps even at this point. So open source learning materials can adopt flipping tab and convert on the fly for legacy users. Also, younger learners expect visual consistency. So obviously the young people these days, and again, you might say, well, the dang spoiled young people want what they want. And it's like, okay, I get it. We didn't have all the tools that the young people these days have, but we also weren't doing all of our stuff online during, certain crises and whatnot, and kicked out of the classroom and all this kind of stuff as well. So you got your pros and cons to be a young person these days. So I would think that all the advantages that they have, they should take. And the internet obviously is one of those advantages, and we should adopt the learning tools to maximize the learning of the youngsters. So the generations expect their tools to match their physical world. So with all the social media and whatnot, flip tab becomes a logical final step. So I think, younger people are going to think this is just, I don't see why it wouldn't be the most logical thing. That's what I think. And I'm not, particularly young. It's like, why? I don't understand, why we wouldn't be trying to look for the best system to help the most people learn the thing, right? So I would think that would be a natural kind of response when the technology is to a point where it's like obvious that you can easily do that, you know? So conclusion, a better standard. So flipping tablature to put the low E on top aligns your eyes, hands, fretboard, diagrams, and spreadsheets. Gets everything going in the same direction. That's easier to do. We see things left to right. It's more intuitive, logical, and finally achievable at this point, thanks to modern technology. The old method was never better. It was just first. That's the point. The old method wasn't better. It's just first. And again, I'm not tearing down the fence without looking at the fence. I see it. I see the fence. It's not built properly for the current conditions, okay? So we have to fix the fence. We have to fix it. We've solved the problem. We need to fix it. So I want everything lined up in the same direction, including the video presentations, the tablatures, the worksheet. So when we, the learner, are looking at this stuff, it's easy.